evening. You're watching The Buck Stops Here and I'm Barkha Dutt. On the program today, bad weather has compounded the massive tragedy that is unfolding in Uttarakhand. And it's a tragedy of Himalayan proportions as these horrific images of deluge and devastation continue to pour in. Tonight, as families look for their loved ones, we want to say thank you to the real heroes, our Jawans. They really have stood up to this Himalayan challenge. More than 8,500 Jawans are spearheading a relief operation that is of a Himalayan scale. The Indian Air Force alone has conducted 150 sorties in the last 24 hours, rescuing 1,400 people just today. 100 paratroopers are now carrying aid to Kedarnath and Hemkund. Tonight, we salute our brave men and women in uniform, without which even the lives that are being saved would not have been saved. Also back home, it's a cloudburst of gloom over the economy. The rupee has closed at a historic low. The government's chief economic advisor joins us for his prescription for the faltering economy.
Is the rupee, in a disequilibrium position? Is it at this point still overvalued so it can plunge a long way? When you look at the rupee in terms of its competitiveness, look over a long horizon. Technically speaking, at this point, it is undervalued.
That's coming up later on The Buck Stops Here. But let's go live now to Uttarakhand, where my colleague Siddharth Pandey has literally been ploughing through the broken roads, wading through water, trying to make it to Kedarnath, which of course is the epicenter of the tragedy. Today, bad weather has meant that in several places in the upper reaches, the choppers could not land. Siddharth, we still do not know the worst of this tragedy.
Well, that's right, Barkha. In fact, that's what everyone has been telling us, that the scale of the tragedy is something that no one can really imagine. Eyewitnesses that we've been speaking to, we've met many people on the road, people who've been recounting the tales of horror, also tales of bravery, how people really bonded together to try and save each other. But what they're saying is that you really have to go there to kind of understand what really went down. The scale, they say, are completely unimaginable, and that's something that we are attempting to do as well as we slowly make our way. It's very slow progress on the road because the national highway is completely broken. It's going to take months, if not longer, to fix. One road finally was open today, but when it was opened, you had almost 200 to 300 cars trying to exit this region. You had a traffic jam on a hillside, and that's very dangerous. You had a few policemen trying to manage the situation, but I think people just so eagerly trying to leave this region. We essentially had traffic jams on this one little road that's actually opened up. So pretty much there's a lot of chaos still. The army and the armed forces trying their best to bring some order, but clearly this is something, as you said, truly of Himalayan proportions.
हाईवे तो दोनों तरफ है, कोई सामान यहाँ पर नहीं आ रहा। कुछ नहीं है, दवाएं नहीं, दूध नहीं, पानी नहीं, कुछ नहीं आते।
ऑल फ्रॉम द कानपुर
सिटी का कोई मदद नहीं मिली है। रामवाड़ा में है, सुबह भी उनसे बात हुई है।
बट उनसे आप बात कर पा रहे हैं, मतलब फोन चल रहा है?
उनके फोन आते हैं तो बात हो जाती है।
बट वो क्या बोल रहे हैं कि प्रशासन या कोई दिख रहा है उनको?
तरफ से अभी तक कोई मदद नहीं पहुंची है रामवाड़ा के अंदर।
कैसे रह रहे हैं? जब आप बात किए उनसे, वो कैसे रह रहे हैं?
सिर्फ पानी पी कर रह रहे हैं, तड़प रहे हैं। मतलब उनकी कोई उम्मीद नहीं है कि शाम तक भी रह सके, नहीं रह सके।
किस जगह में वो है अभी सर? मतलब
उनके देखते देखते वहाँ पर 20-25 आदमियों ने दम तोड़ दिया है।
कुंड में लगभग 5,000 लोग फंसे हैं। वहाँ 5 दिन से न खाने की व्यवस्था है, न पानी की व्यवस्था है। वो लोग बेमौत मर जाएंगे।
ये कपड़े जो आप देख रहे हैं, ये दूसरों के दिए हुए पहनना हूं मैं। मेरे पास में इस समय कुछ नहीं है, जीरो हूं मैं। रात को 12 बजे तक इंतजार करते रहे कि भाई प्रशासन की ओर से कोई अलार्म नहीं है, तो हम रात को 2 बजे पीछे की दीवार टूटी है और वो झील का पानी आगे से आकर के पड़ोसियों के माध्यम से केवल इंफॉर्मेशन ये मिली कि भागो।
हमने उस मंजर देखा, उस मौत को छुआ। हमने 16 तारीख रात को जो जला आया, मंदिर अंदर सभी को सांत्वना देते रहे कि बचेंगे, कल सुबह होगी, ये काली रात जाएगी।
I wanted to save myself and my family. I told them to move to the other hotel, but we couldn't anticipate the speed of the mud. They dragged us like anything. 3 of us, me, my son and my wife, we were saved, but my daughter and my mother-in-law, they were washed away.
बॉम्बे से आए, इधर आके फंस गए खाने में। एक पाती जमाना भी घूम गया।
This is a national tragedy, and the heartbreak too is of Himalayan proportions. Siddharth, it's actually difficult to hear what some of those families are going through. Of course, thousands have made it out, but we actually have no estimate at the moment, isn't that correct, of how many more may be stranded? The government till yesterday was pegging that figure at over 60,000, but with Kedarnath still remaining inaccessible, you are in that valley now, but the actual area still remaining inaccessible, the only way up and down by air and bad weather compounding that. Do we have any idea at all of what is happening in the uppermost reaches and the interiors of these areas?
Well, Barkha, in fact, we just heard some of those voices of people who made it out. In fact, there were other voices too. When I spoke to a lady, a young mother, and I asked her if she could describe the scene of what really went down, and she just kept looking out the window and started crying, and I just didn't really have the heart to press on with that. But I think what everyone is just telling us is just really brace yourself. This is something that this country has not really seen, the kind of tragedy, the kind of scale. The big question is how many people were up there. There is no system of registering the number of people who are actually going up on that pilgrimage. That's a question that many people are asking. Should the numbers be regulated, the number of people actually going up, to make sure that if tragedy were to strike, that the administration can take better care. But that's something that's still going to haunt us, that question. We're going to actually have to get on the ground and find out really the kind of scale of devastation. But what we've been told is that this is something that really has not been seen, at least in these parts, in a very long time.
And very quickly, Siddharth, there has been some controversy with regard to whether the Met Department issued a specific enough warning. The Weather Department here in Delhi making the argument that rainfall was forecast for severe and extremely severe conditions over that critical weekend of the 15th and 16th. But the state government continuing to maintain, including the Chief Minister, whom I spoke to a little while earlier, that the warnings were not specific. You can see those warnings by the Met Department on your screen. Mr. Vijay Bahuguna, and we'll be playing out that interview shortly later in the program, continuing to maintain that the warnings were not specific enough for him to have conducted evacuations or done anything more than he did.
Well, that's right, but the Met Department still insisting that they had given specific information that it was going to turn bad. But the fact of the matter is, I think no one can really predict how bad things would get, but clearly if that warning had been taken. But the big question is, could the administration have done anything at that time? People were already en route. You still have to walk 16 kilometers. The last stretch you have to walk on foot. So could they really have recalled those people? Was there any mechanism in place to try and put them in some kind of a shelter in between? That's the big question. So could the admin have done anything at all even after that point? Could they have perhaps acted quicker on the information they were getting from the Met Department? Those are questions which will, I think, haunt us all for a long time.
Well, we'll be talking to the Chief Minister of Uttarakhand, Vijay Bahuguna, on whether his state government actually ignored the warnings or were the warnings genuinely not specific enough for the state government to have done anything very different. Siddharth, stay with us, but let's take a moment before we look at all the other issues that this tragedy has thrown up, including whether we really respect the environment and the ecology. Let's take this moment to actually thank those who are conducting a mammoth a rescue operation really of a Himalayan scale, commensurate with the tragedy that is unfolding, which is now being called a tsunami. It's a tragedy, it's a Himalayan tsunami, it's devastation and deluge, and we are taking this moment to thank our jawans of the ITBP, our soldiers from the army, our soldiers of the Air Force. And joining me live now is the Director General of the ITBP and the National Disaster Response Force, Ajay Chadha. We'll also be crossing live to Dehradun to talk to Air Commodore Rajesh Issar, who's the Task Force Commander of Operation Rahat, in just a moment. Let me start with you, Mr. Chadha. Your men have been working overtime. What are some of the biggest difficulties that they are facing?
Thank you, Barkha. The main difficulty when the incident took place was of connectivity. Entire Kedarnath valley was cut off. The road ahead of Rudraprayag was non-existent at a number of places, and the only access to Kedarnath and Gaurikund was through helicopters, and initially only helicopters could land at Kedarnath. Gaurikund there was no helipad. So that was the main challenge before us, whereas we could reach the other places of disaster, but Kedarnath we had to wait till the choppers were available and weather was good enough to land us there.
And sir, many of your men have been risking their own lives really to conduct these rescue operations. What sort of hardships are they having to battle along the way, Mr. Chadha?
They are used to all kinds of hardships. They go on long patrols, so that is not the issue. That is part of their job. So, but satisfaction ultimately is that when we are able to rescue the people, and still we are a long way to go, because quite a few people are there at Gaurikund. Although Kedarnath, the people were evacuated yesterday also, today also, but people who had moved to higher mountains, they keep coming. And we are expecting a few more people coming tonight and tomorrow early morning at Kedarnath. So we hope to evacuate them tomorrow. But Gaurikund will take some time, although ITBP personnel, they are trying to make a track from Gaurikund to Sonprayag. Ahead of Sonprayag, the road is okay, connectivity is okay. So once that track is made, I think we'll be able to rescue able-bodied men through the track, so that load on heli sorties will reduce.
Well, Air Commodore Rajesh Issar is also joining us from Dehradun tonight. He's the Task Force Commander of Operation Rahat. The Air Force has, of course, conducted 150 sorties just in the last 24 hours. But Air Commodore, the weather has made your life a little more difficult today, hasn't it?
Yes, in the morning, we launched at 6:30, but unfortunately because of weather, everybody had to come back. But we more than made up towards the afternoon. In fact, we were flying right till sunset. So even today, despite this weather, we've rescued close to 600 plus people. We are still counting, and hopefully we get a spell of good weather for the next 2 days.
Air Commodore Issar, give us a sense of what your men are seeing as they fly these sorties, as they go into the uppermost reaches. Air operations have become critical because the roads have been washed away in many parts. People are not being able to be evacuated by foot. What are your men seeing? What kind of eyewitness accounts are they bringing back?
Very heart-rending ones. But essentially the biggest problem, as was brought out by the earlier speaker, I missed out the first part, is that this main valley of Kedarnath, and between this Gupta Kashi and the Gaurikund area and onwards to Kedarnath is where the real challenge is. It's a very narrow valley. Most of the bigger helicopters, the Me class, can't go there. It is only the lighter ALH class and some civilian helicopters which are operating there. It's a very big challenge. Most of the places they are not able to land. They are picking up people either from the hover or with one skid down there. A lot of risks, but worthwhile, because we prioritize these cases. We are only picking up the really sick or the old who just can't move. The able-bodied we are leaving for a later priority. So there are scenes, like I'll tell you. There was a scene where we wanted to pick up a lady and a child, and yet, she would not leave the dead body, presumably of her husband. Yeah. These affects the pilot, but it just makes you be a little more committed to the whole thing.
I can only imagine the heartbreak, and as we're seeing again and again tonight, we're saluting our men and women in uniforms. Our Jawans are our heroes. We don't remember them except in times of crises. We don't remember them enough. And tonight, we are amending that and starting tonight's broadcast by saying thank you. Let me take this back to Mr. Chadha. Mr. Chadha, a lot of people want to help. They want to know what people there need. How can they help? How can our viewers help? Can we help your men who are on duty there in any way? What is the way that people can help?
Our people are self-sufficient. They are being provided for. I think the best course for them would be to contact the state government. They would have put some machinery in place to receive help. So they would be in a better position to guide them, whatever help they need at this moment.
Let me ask both of you in conclusion, Mr. Chadha, to you first, that many operations of rescue have been conducted by your people, by the army, by the Air Force before, but is this scale of devastation completely unprecedented given what the ITBP has seen in some of these areas?
ITBP is the first responder in Uttarakhand as well as Himachal Pradesh, but this is by far the unprecedented disaster, and we have not seen anything of this magnitude in the past.
Scary thought there. Air Commodore Isser, come in there. You're calling this Operation Rahat. You're trying to bring relief to devastated, heartbroken people there who are hoping against hope that their loved ones may be alive. What are the main challenges or obstacles to your rescue operations tonight, sir?
Right in the beginning we realized that everything could not be done by air only.
Yes.
So, all the agencies, we got together about 48 hours before, quickly brainstormed, and the focus was in dropping these special teams of ITBP, NDRF and now even Army, big numbers, close to 90 paratroopers we are dropping at these places. The key is these guys are fit, they are trained, they will climb up all these hills where these very old people somehow have survived and try and get them down, if required, really hold them and get them down and provide medical aid, etc., so that they survive, because right now the focus is not on who are dead already, but on who are surviving and they need to come back. So we put these teams on ground at various places, and I think in the coming hours this will pay very good dividends.
Well, Air Commodore Isser and Mr. Ajay Chadha, I often say that every time there's a crisis in this country, it is our men and women in uniform who do what the administration can't or won't, from building bridges to rescuing children from borewells. This country says its thank you to our soldiers and our men and women in uniform tonight. I thank you both for joining us on the Buck Stops here. A Herculean effort by our forge in the upper reaches of Uttarakhand, where the tragedy is still unfolding. Now the question is being asked, and it will be asked again and again over the next many days. Were warnings ignored? Were warnings from the weather department ignored? Were warnings that were asking for the ecology to be safeguarded ignored by our political establishment, by the building mafia, by the timber mafia, by many commercial interests? We'll be looking at all of that on the Buck Stops here this evening, but let's start with our newsmaker tonight, Uttarakhand Chief Minister Vijay Bahuguna. Mr. Bahuguna, I'd like to start by asking you whether we have any better sense of the scale of devastation, the scale of tragedy. You had said yesterday that hundreds were feared to be dead. Do we have any estimation of how high the casualties may actually run?
The maximum casualty has taken place in the Kedar Valley, and the Kedar temple precedence and the route from Gauri Kund to Kedarnath, which is a walk. The difficulty is that Kedarnath premises, we have been able to evacuate people, those who are alive, but we have not been able to access the people who are on foot between Gauri Kund to Kedarnath. And the choppers have not been able to land there because there is no space. Now the NDRF team and the army, they are going on foot. Unless until they come back to me with the exact figures, it will be very difficult. But as I have told you earlier also, that the death would run in hundreds.
Now, of course, we do know that the chopper operations, Mr. Bahuguna, have been hampered by the weather today, and there are thousands and thousands who are still stranded. So are you actually saying that we do not yet know the worst of this tragedy? It's unfolding bit by bit as we have not been able to reach the uppermost reaches of the Gauri Kund area?
No, we have some figures in mind, we have got some idea, But you see, as a Chief Minister, I'm supposed to give you the correct information. The correct information is that the death toll is very high, and what is not relevant is how many people have expired. Now our mission is to save those who are alive. We have been able to save a large number of people, population. We have moved them from their areas where they were stranded to safe havens. Now they are in about number of relief camps. My other problem is from the relief camps I can't take them out by road because more than 500 roads are damaged. About 200 bridges have been washed out. So the only way is I take them out by choppers. The army 12 choppers hired by the state. They are doing a very, very good work. And in spite of bad weather, I have been flying every day. I have been going to all these remote areas, to the sensitive areas. It will take some time, Barkhaji, but I can tell you that the worst is over and now the relief and the rescue operation is on.
Well, I hope you're right that the worst is over, because the military personnel we were just talking to said that they have never seen a tragedy like this unfold in Uttarakhand. Now, Mr. Bahuguna, serious questions are being raised as to whether the Met Department's warnings could have been acted upon. The Met Department here in Delhi is saying that it issued a warning of severe rainfall on the 15th. Let's bring you up that graphic there. You can see it on your screen. This is what the Weather Department here is saying, that they issued a warning of severe rainfall on Saturday and followed it up with a warning of extremely severe rainfall on Sunday. Now, this is the crucial weekend before the Monday of the 17th, when really the heaviest rain takes place. My question to you, Mr. Bahuguna, is this, that could you not have done more? You had drills in place, you had rehearsals in place, you had the yatris still going up. Could all of this not have been halted given these warnings? Could you not have done more?
May I explain? First of all, you see, when we get warnings of weather conditions, they say that there'll be heavy rain, they say there'll be light rain. Now this is the peak period of tourism in Uttarakhand, where over 1 lakh of people come on their own, and you see their exact locations and the exact numbers are not known to us. It's such a big state. We did stop all the flights which we were operating to Kedarnath when we got this warning. So all air flights to Kedarnath have been stopped. But people were already there, they were in the premises, and they were even in the worst of the worst time. Thousands of people stay in Kedarnath, you know, and they are already there, their employees are there, the tourists are there, and this entire route you have to walk 20 kilometers. They come here. Now, if there would have been a warning of flash flood, if there would have been a warning of cloud burst, if there would have been a warning of floods, it has to be area specific. It's such a huge state with such a big geographical area. I don't know where calamity is going to strike, and it is not specific that you are going to have a cloud burst or you are going to have a flash flood. Unless until we get such information, Barkhaji, how can anybody control the movement of 1 lakh of tourists which are in the state and the local population whose livelihood depends upon this Char Dham Yatra? You know what the state economy depends on: tourism and power. And we did.
No, but sorry, let me just get that right. Are you saying that the warning was not specific enough to act on? Because the Met Department is saying they issued a very specific warning. No,
Madam, severe rains in Delhi. Do you evacuate Delhi? Please tell me. Or do you start evacuating people from the banks of the river because they are going to rain? It has to be. And what happened in Kedarnath, you see some lake, I think, ultimately the environmentalists will tell us. But from above the Kedarnath, some lake has crossed its embankment, or the glaciers burst. No, this is the reason why the tragedy has taken place. It is not because of rains. Rains every year we have. You know, hills have got heavy rains, but we have never faced such a situation. It's because of some lake or some cloudburst over Kedarnath which has caused all this calamity. And there was no forecast of any cloudburst, or it has to be area specific, that look here, the cloud formations could be dangerous in Chamoli district, it could be dangerous in Pauri district. So I am not blaming them, but try to understand my practical problem. How can I ask people, move out of Uttarakhand? I never knew which area will be struck by calamity.
But there are many other serious questions being raised, Mr. Bahuguna, not just about your government, but about your predecessors as well. Environmentalists are asking serious questions about rapid construction that has taken place. After all, there was a 2002 law that said that there should be no construction within 100 meters of the river. Now, let's take a look at those pictures before I come to you. Those pictures we've seen of those buildings actually tumbling down right on the banks of the river. We're just going to bring up those pictures. That shows that law has been completely flouted. There's a CAG report. There you can see those buildings falling into this river? What were those buildings doing there to begin with? There's a CAG report that 3 years ago said that there's one hydel project for every 5 to 7 kilometers, and often these dams were built at great cost to the environment. And there is then, of course, the eco-zone notification of 4,000 plus square kilometers that the Environment Ministry wanted to create as an eco-zone that you and other politicians in the state have opposed. So there are questions of how much of this is man-made.
No, I am extremely obliged to you that you have raised these issues. Now I'd like to respond. You see, the entire cities of Uttarakhand are built on the banks of the rivers. And not from today, I think from even 100 years ago. The entire Uttarkashi city, the Haridwar city, these cities have been built on the banks of the river. And these cities have survived, these buildings have survived. You cannot blame the government that any new construction has come up on the bank which is new. Our bylaws are there, our restrictions are there, we don't allow it. So you have to be, you just can't make a sweeping allegations because you have allowed construction on the banks of the rivers. Haridwar was not built by Bahuguna or by the BJP chief ministers. Uttarkashi has not been built by me. Rudraprayag, Srinagar, they have not been built by me. These cities are here from, I think, centuries. So this is a very vague allegation, and when you talk of eco-sensitive zone, try to understand, please read my letter. I think it's very unfair. What I am stating is the position of the state government. That is the position of the state assembly. We represent a people. And the same policy was adopted by the BJP government when the BJP was here. We are saying we are not opposed to environment, but please strike a balance between environment and development. You can't just say that in the name of environment, proposals which are cleared by the ministries earlier, schemes which are cleared by the Ministry of Environment earlier, after 7 years you say that the permission was wrong, now you stop it. Just because there's some activist who comes forward and says something. You see, activism is fine, but not at the cost of development. Strike a balance. If any project is dangerous because of environmental concerns, the government will not pass it, and we have not passed it. I have not given any power projects since I became a chief minister. Not even one megawatt power project has come up. All the earlier power projects which had been cleared by the government of India, Ministry of Environment, either you prosecute those officers who gave those permissions. But someday some person has some emotion, some person has come with some idea, and then you say that no, this is wrong. That is not done with investments by the public sector corporations, by individuals. It was your right to stop. The state government doesn't grant permissions.
We will leave it there.
From the Ministry of Environment.
Yeah, we leave it there. Thanks so much for being our newsmaker at 9, and let's take it to our debate tonight. The debate, of course, is how much of this disaster is man-made. Of course, the tragedy is a result of nature's wrath, but how much of that anger has been provoked as a result of flawed policies and complacency. We heard a combative Chief Minister there. Let's introduce our panel this evening. We're joined by R.K. Pachauri. He's, of course, one of the world's foremost commentators and experts on the environment as well as on climate change. We're also joined from Bangalore tonight by Rohini Nilekani. She's an activist and a well-known commentator who spent some time in Uttarakhand, and Mr. Bahuguna was not being very complimentary about activists, of course, there, so we'll ask her a little bit about what she felt about that. And with us in the studio is well-known commentator Pushpesh Pant, who, of course, also knows these hills like the back of his hand, and they are your homeland as well. Let me take this to you, Mr. Pachauri. You're hearing Mr. Bahuguna going on arguing that there cannot be this kind of stridency by environmental activists, that none of this was actually compounded by flawed policies or by buildings built right on the river. Is that actually accurate? Can we stand back here and pat ourselves on the back and say that we have not contributed to this unfolding tragedy?
Well, I really wouldn't want to pass any judgment on that statement, but let me say two things. Firstly, I think we have to be guided by knowledge. I have the privilege of chairing the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and we mobilize the most distinguished scientists from all over the world. And 2 years ago, we brought out a special report on extreme events and disasters, which clearly stated that extreme precipitation events are going to increase both in terms of frequency and intensity. Now, I'm not saying that this incident is the result of human-induced climate change, but I would want to say that this is an example of the kind of event that you're going to see in much greater frequency and intensity in the future. So the second point I'd like to make is, let's learn from this. I think it's become increasingly clear that if we want to protect the lives and property of people in that region and other parts of the country, then we have to put in place adaptation measures. What are these adaptation measures? Early warning signs. Now, early warning has to be acted on. You really can't treat it as something which is purely a piece of news.
But Mr.
That doesn't
Pachauri, you
affect
heard the
the
Chief
people of
Minister
that
saying, if I may interrupt you there on early warnings, you heard the Chief Minister saying that when the Weather Department said extremely severe rain, he did not take that as a specific warning. He said you evacuate Delhi when you get a warning of extreme rain. Now, I mean, I don't think Delhi and the hills are comparable to begin with.
Well, the point is that, as I said, you've got to learn from this tragic incident. And I think it's absolutely clear that knowledge from science tells us that these events are going to become much more frequent and much more intense. So when you get a warning, then I think you've got to have in place a mechanism and a set of processes by which you take immediate action. That's not there at this point of time, and I don't blame anybody, because this may have occurred after 50 years or 100 years, but let's accept the fact that this is going to happen far more frequently than we have experienced in the past. And I also want to say that there's an extremely important response that we have to put in place, and that relates to local regulations and their implementation.
Yeah.
I think local bodies have to ensure that structures, buildings, tourism facilities don't come up in places which are going to be at heavy risk, because you have to protect lives and property. And in my view, development is not merely constructing more buildings and constructing more roads. Development is about ensuring the well-being and the safety of the people.
Let me take
and
this
therefore,
to... Yeah,
you know...
Yeah, sir, you made some very important points.
Certainly we have to promote development activities, but please, for heaven's sake, let's look at where the risks are going to be high, where the vulnerability of the people and their property is going to be extremely high.
But the problem, sir, is that we don't respond to this till there is a crisis, and we live from crisis to crisis. Pushpesh Pant, you heard what the Chief Minister said. He kind of dismissed this environmental activism.
I'm shocked, and I think we are talking of eco-sensitive zones.
Yeah.
I wish we had a more sensitive Chief Minister. I found particularly hilarious his use of the first person singular. I can tell you this, I can't tell you that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. What we are seeing is what the Jawans, what your news report very clearly brings out, the ITBP, the Air Force, and the Army.
They're replacing the administration. They're doing what the administration can't avoid.
People present, and the local administration and the state government hasn't exactly covered itself in glory. Mr. Bahuguna is living in a fool's paradise if he thinks aggression is the best form of defense. This was the gentleman who was trying, with all the BJP leaders as well, in tow, to withdraw the notification about the eco-sensitive
He says it's a unanimous resolution by the Uttarakhand Assembly.
And I think he was totally at loss for words today. When you ask him, I have heard of various things, he's abusing the environmentalists, but he comes out with a new formulation of glacier bursts. And, you know, a funny part of a natural lake having embankments. And of course, the problem is that is he looking for an astrological prediction of the Falit Jyotish, of the ancient variety of the Devaprayag Vedashala, where some Jyotish will tell him that the rain will specifically strike at a particular point. I mean, I think the meteorological predictions...
What should he have done with those Met predictions?
He should have immediately taken steps to stop the movement, and he's talking of the flights being stopped. Do you think that 72,000 tourists and pilgrims have reached Uttarakhand on his officially sponsored heli-hops? They are there, more than 2,000 buses plying. These people almost amount to 7 to 8% of the total population in the state.
Before I take this to Rohini Nilekani, since you know this area so well, what is the biggest environmental crisis unfolding there right now?
The biggest environmental crisis is the governments, whether it is Congress or BJP, think that development is only large-scale projects which have take-backs, which have commissions. I mean, I was just in a discussion in this studio an hour back, where a Congress spokesperson said, where are the contractors in Uttarakhand to do these dams? We'll have to get them from Andhra or elsewhere, where a sympathetic government or our people like us are working, people who can help us next.
So there's a contractor mafia that is in a sense feeding both parties. Rohini Nilekani, where is that balance between development, which R.K. Pachauri is saying that no one is dissing development, and the fact of the matter is that it can't be a kind of a mafia raj, which is what is happening in many of these hills. In many of the rural areas especially, there are no proper zoning laws. Where there are laws, for example, this 2002 law that says that there should be no construction within 100 meters of a river, we have seen from those pictures that there were buildings right on the river.
Yeah, so, you know, Barkha, I went in March with Dr. Ravi Chopra and others across 16 small and big river valleys of Uttarakhand to try and understand exactly what is being done on those rivers that are so much part of the national consciousness. Just the names, Ganga, Yamuna, Alaknanda, Mandakini, Bhagirathi, these are names that are seeped in our consciousness. And what are we doing to those rivers? I think to some extent I do understand it is not going to be easy to make that balance between environment and development. We need to know on what principles we are going to make these trade-offs. Yeah. But after seeing what we are doing, for example, just in terms of exploiting hydropower, I have a map here. Not all these dams are going to be built because there isn't enough water or enough river for them. But just look at this picture. Look at what is the concept of what dams can be in a small state like Uttarakhand. If we don't balance this out, if we don't say most of these projects are unviable, and in fact somebody should find out how many dams today after the deluge are actually operating, and how many turbines have gone under siltation. I don't have that data, but I was told that some dams have already been affected in the last 3 or 4 days. Someone should check on that and report back to us. So I think we will have no choice but to scale back on some of the, you know, megalomaniac ideas we have of the infrastructure. And we have to look at basic infrastructure which is going to help that pilgrim population. Lakhs of people who want to go to the abode of the gods, as Uttarakhand is called. That state is not ready for that pilgrim traffic. In low season flow in March, the roads were so bad, Barkha, that it was a surprise that our car managed those 6 days of that grueling hillside roads. And if that's the case on normal days when there's no rain, only God help the pilgrims who go when there's a cloud burst like this. One last thing before we ask anything else. If this was a once in a 100-year event before, it seems like a rare event. Like Dr. Pachauri says, if it's not going to be so rare anymore, we will have no choice but to create much better systems than we saw in Uttarakhand right now. And this is a wake-up call, this is a time of reckoning, and it's not just Uttarakhand, it's all those Himalayan states. Please look at Sikkim, please look at the other states. The same thing is building up there.
Absolutely.
So it's really a tragedy that was waiting to happen, and my heart goes out to all the people who are there today.
R.K. Pachauri, the focus has returned to the safety of dams. A CAG report 3 years ago is talking about how environmental principles have been flouted in Uttarakhand to build these hydel projects. There's now one dam and one project for every 5 to 7 kilometers in Uttarakhand. The focus returning on the debate around big dams, which has never been fully resolved in this country. Do we need to revisit that debate more seriously without sneering at environmental activism?
Well, let me say 3 things. Firstly, I think we need to now focus on the future. And that future has to be driven by knowledge. As I said earlier, you're going to see many more such extreme events, far more frequent, far more intense. And therefore, we've got to put in place infrastructure, we've got to put in place community reaction, and of course, local governance that would respond to that kind of an anticipated future. The second point I'd like to make is that we also need to redefine development. I mean, why do we have to think of development in the hills, which are really an eco-fragile region, in the same manner that you have development in areas that are generally immune from such impacts? And the third thing I'd like to say is that we really need to create local governance that is able to put in place measures by which, let's say, if a dam is going to create serious environmental impacts or ecological effects, then we build that into the assessment of that particular project. And I think, I'm afraid in the past we have not looked at some of those impacts in a serious manner. So I think we really need to look at the future and redefine it in a way that would protect the lives and property of people in that region and help them to develop in a way that really suits.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me just get quick last words from Pushpesh and Rohini. Pushpesh Pant, and Diliwalas love going into the hills, and everybody wants to own a piece of the hills, and that has been part of the problem. Uttarakhand has, like many other states, put into place laws that say that only locals can buy land, but there are ways to circumvent these rules, and a number of people are doing it. Now, what you would expect at the minimum in these areas is some sort of mandatory green area to be left every time, or trees to be planted, or afforestation to take place every time a cottage is built, for example. But even that doesn't happen.
No, I think what Dr. Pachauri is saying, if we sort of implement the existing laws with certain objectivity and rigor,
Yes.
these things would not happen. If we had a responsive and responsible government, if it was participatory with local governance, community management of resources, this would not happen.
So there's a
If we
systemic
did not
corruption
make-
that's enabling
If we did
it?
not make an arbitrary distinction between outsiders and insiders,
Insiders,
this
yeah.
would not happen. You know, I think Dr. Pachauri is more a Pahadi than I am, because all his childhood was spent in the same house
Yeah.
in Nainital. He has as happy memories as I have of the childhood spent there. But I think the problem is not of those of us who love to stay in the hills. I mean, the hills have a great ecological, economic value for this whole subcontinent. The rivers flow out of the Himalayas. The monsoon is caused by that. And as Dr. Pachauri rightly says, rather than beat our breasts about what has happened, let's focus on the future.
Where would you focus on the future?
I would focus on the future of I mean, if out of this nightmare we can resume the dream, or have a rebirth of a dream of Uttarakhand state, of decentralized, small is beautiful development, and a totally different model of development, a definition of development which keeps in mind the load bearing capacity of the fragile Himalayas, so the reinforced concrete doesn't bury the residents, nor does the vehicular traffic take charge.
And what you're saying is so important, because the world over, actually the trend is to go local. The trend is to go small. Small is big. Rohini Nilekani will give you the last word. Also changes that take place within fragile ecologies have to come from the local population. What are you picking up from people that you have met there? I mean, of course, R.K. Pachauri and Pushpesh Pant is a Pahadi. R.K. Pachauri, as Professor Pant said, has spent all of his life growing up in the hills. But all of us love the hills. We love the Himalayas. We want to save them. Your thoughts as we close tonight.
Yes. From Kerala to Bengal, the Himalayas belong not just to Indians but possibly to the whole world. And the local people are very sensitive to this. Many of them feel caught between this question of environment and development, and they say things most eloquently. And we should listen to the voice perhaps of Sushila Bhandari, an activist around the Mandakini River area, who's has been protesting a dam that's coming up there, saying that all dams are not bad, but how you do them, how are we making these trade-offs, let's be more sensible about them. Because she says, I find that very touching, कि ये गंगा और हिमालय पूरे देश का धरोहर है, is the heritage of the whole country, और पूरे देश का अधिकार बनता है हिमालय और हमारी गंगा, and गंगा means every river, को बचाने का, उसकी रक्षा करने का. And I think that feeling is very strong. If we can learn from that, we have intergenerational responsibilities. We cannot have reckless development in the mountains. It's not good for anybody now or ever. So these discussions have to happen. This discourse has to stay alive even after the media forgets about Uttarakhand, because in Maharashtra there is a drought, and it's for similar reasons. We are not managing our water wisely, and it's more of a crisis than almost anything else in the country. Wake up call. Let's
Absolutely. And I think it's actually a misnomer to position.
And please listen to the voice of science, listen to knowledge, because if
Yes,
this country
let's
has to
use
get
good
anywhere,
science.
we cannot live in
Absolutely.
ignorance.
And
All
also
right?
listen to the people.
We need good science.
Also
and
listen
good
to the
wisdom.
people.
Listen
We
to
need
the people.
Also listen to
Yes.
the people.
People.
Genuine
Both.
participatory democracy, and
Absolutely.
artificial to position this debate as development versus environment, because often what happens in the name of development is the very antithesis of that. We are going to keep a close eye on this story. For now, Pushpesh Pant, R.K. Pachauri, Rohini Nilekani, thanks for joining us on the Buck Stops here. As we said, it's a cloudburst of gloom over the economy as well. The rupee is closing at a historic low. On the other side of the break, the chief economic advisor of the government, does he have any prescription at all?
In terms of fundamentals, the rupee has gone below the value it should be at.
Welcome back. You're watching the Buck Stops here. The cloudburst in Uttarakhand is one tragedy. The other cloudburst of gloom is over the economy, where the rupee today has closed at a historic low. Time now for the big interview with Raghuram Rajan, the government's chief economic advisor, on whether he has any prescriptions. The rupee is plummeting. Investor confidence is shaky, and there's a long shadow hanging over the business environment in India. It's not an easy time to be the government's chief economic advisor and try and remain optimistic in the midst of all this gloom. Raghuram Rajan is with us. The Finance Ministry said a few days ago that they expected the rupee to course correct. and they thought that the worst was over. Clearly it was not. We now have the rupee closing at a historic low. At that time the ministry had argued that they were not unduly alarmed. Are you alarmed now?
No, I think what you have to do is look at this in the context of what's happening in the rest of the world. What's happening is the US Federal Reserve is moving away from its policy of quantitative easing. What that means is every month it was putting in $85 billion into the bond markets. Now it says at some point towards the end of the year it's going to stop doing that. Now what that means is interest rates in the United States are probably going to start moving up. If interest rates in the United States move up, all the people who've been pouring their money into the emerging markets say, well, why not bring some of it back, because it's safer in the United States, we get a good yield, and so some of that money is leaving. That's causing problems across emerging markets. You mentioned the rupee. If bond investors in India sell bonds and take their money out, they want dollars. That puts pressure on the rupee because they're selling their rupees to get dollars. And what that does is makes the dollar more expensive.
Let's put the reason aside for a moment because we can debate that. But the consequence, are you now alarmed? Would you use the word alarmed at this moment?
No, because to some extent what is happening is people are reacting to the news, the volatility created by the US announcement. What you have to look at is the rupee in a disequilibrium position? Is it at this point still overvalued so it can plunge a long way? When you look at the rupee in terms of its competitiveness, look over a long horizon, technically speaking, at this point it is undervalued. In other words, if you look at the real effective exchange rate, that's what economists use to see whether it's worth the right amount, you see that the rupee actually has gone below the real effective exchange rate that it should be at. So as a result, the sense is, yes, this will correct. Now, when exactly it correct, and I'm not the person who said, we have reached the bottom.
No, you didn't say that. You didn't say that. But
it will course. The rupee will find its equilibrium.
How much worse do you think it will get before it gets better?
We don't know. I mean, that depends on the mood of investors. And you've heard the term irrational exuberance. You could also use the term irrational pessimism. So until that irrationality to some extent evaporates, until the overshooting, people sort of think, I'd better get out before the next guy gets out. At some point they say this has gone too far. Now it's so lucrative to put in money, and then you see the pushback, which can be quite sudden. So the point is, I don't know when that is going to take place, but in terms of fundamentals, the rupee has gone below the value it should be at.
That's interesting that you should say that, because there have been arguments that the rupee actually needs to plummet further to reach its natural level, that it has actually been overvalued. There have been economists who suggested that its natural level would be about 70 rupees to the US dollar.
I'm not one of those.
You clearly are not, but that has been the argument, that it is being held up artificially.
So what are the arguments for the rupee being lower that people advance? One, because we are running a large current account deficit, somehow if we have a low rupee, we're going to start exporting much more, and that will narrow the current account deficit. Now, that is true to some extent, but this is why I said we have to look at the competitiveness of the rupee, and right now we are very competitive relative to the historic past. The real problem, why our exports are not picking up, is because our partner countries are pretty much dead in the water. I mean, we're talking about the Indian economy being bad at 5% growth. We have a ton of industrial economies coasting along at 0, but we have countries like Brazil, 1.5%. We have Russia, 2.5%. Turkey. All these countries have problems. So the point is, across the world, it's difficult to export. However, we need to import because we've got oil as imports, we've got coal as imports. Of course, we have gold, which has come off in this last month considerably.